So, what on earth does a U.S. immigration problem have to do with the economy of a tiny Pacific island nation? Well, today, we're going to unpack a pretty surprising deal between the United States and Palau. It's an agreement that involves millions of dollars and honestly has some pretty big implications for how we think about deportation.
All right, so to really get how this deal even came to be, we first have to look at a major logistical headache facing U.S. immigration authorities. And this right here, this is the central question. What happens when the U.S. wants to deport someone, but their home country just refuses to take them back? It creates this kind of legal and logistical limbo. And for any administration trying to enforce its immigration laws, that is a huge roadblock. So the Trump administration has made ramping up deportations a top priority. But to do that, they've had to find what are called third countries, basically other nations that are willing to accept deportees who can't go home. And that right there is where our story really kicks off. And it turns out one of those willing partners was the Republic of Palau, a small island nation way out in the Western Pacific. Now, to really wrap your head around this story, you gotta understand just how small we're talking. The entire population of Palau is just 18,000 people. I mean, that's about the size of a small town. Keep that number in your head because it makes this next official statement from the U.S. Embassy all the more striking. So you've got this formal statement from a U.S. embassy, and it's highlighting how this tiny nation of 18,000 people is helping to enforce American immigration law. It's pretty wild when you think about it. So what are the exact terms of this cooperation? Okay, let's break down the actual memorandum of understanding. What exactly is in this deal? What are the terms? At its core, it's a really straightforward exchange. The U.S. provides $7.5 million in aid. In return, Palau agrees to accept up to 75 people who the U.S. wants to deport but can't send back to their countries of origin. And you might be asking, who are these individuals? Well, the agreement is super specific about this. They are people who have never been charged with a crime. They're being deported for non-criminal reasons, but for whatever reason, their home countries just won't take them back. But wait, that $7.5 million isn't the whole story. The U.S. is also kicking in an additional $8 million in very targeted support, $6 million for Palau's civil service pension plan, and another $2 million for law enforcement. This shows the U.S. isn't just, dropping people off. It's also investing in the local infrastructure that's needed to support them. So, on the surface, this kind of looks like a win-win, right? But what are the real motivations for each country? Why do they both agree to this pretty unusual partnership? For the U.S., it's simple. They need a place to send to these specific deportees to show they're enforcing immigration laws. But for Palau, it's about more than just the aid money. The president's office has actually said that these new residents could help fill local labor shortages, essentially turning a U.S. problem into a potential economic opportunity for the island. Now, it's really important to understand that this deal didn't happen overnight, and it's definitely not happening in a vacuum. To really get its significance, we've got to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. And this timeline shows that this deal was not a slam dunk at all. In fact, just a few months ago, Palau's Congress flat out rejected a U.S. proposal to host asylum seekers. So what was the key change? The new deal is much more specific, focusing only on those non-criminal deportees. And that distinction, that was enough to get it signed. And here's the thing. The deal with Palau isn't a one-off. It's actually part of a global strategy. The U.S. is pursuing very similar agreements with nations all across Africa and Central America, creating this whole network of countries to help manage its deportations. But, as you can imagine, this whole strategy is highly controversial. Human rights advocates argue that sending people to countries where they have zero connections is a violation of their rights and really just a way to sidestep due process. The Trump administration, on the other hand, frames this as a matter of national security. They argue that these agreements are a necessary tool for managing immigration and ultimately keeping the country safe. So this deal between a global superpower and a tiny island nation, it's so much more than just a local story. It's really a window into a growing global trend. And it leaves us with a critical question. As migration patterns all over the world continue to shift, are these deportation deals the future of immigration policy? And what does that future even look like?